Good morning, everyone. So today you and I are going to talk about conservative programmers and stability. So let's get into it. Now I know that title doesn't inspire much excitement, now does it? But it's a thought that I've had, which was honestly, it was kind of sparked by Bjarne Strostrup. I don't know if I pronounce his last name correctly, but I want to because I have a great deal of respect for that man. And for the juniors out there who may not know who this is, he is the person behind C++. And if you don't know what C++ is, let's just say it's probably it's not the most popular language in the world, but it is the most important one. Hands down. It's the programming language that runs most of the world. Frankly, or at least it is the programming language that your programming language most likely is depending on in order to do a lot of the stuff that it can do. It is the most powerful programming language in the world, if you ask me, and it's the most. It is very, very, very important. Anywho, I'm not saying that you should go and learn it if you don't want to, but it is very powerful and it is extremely well established. But that's not what I want to talk about. What I want to talk about is actually something that I've had a thought about this many times, and it's actually. This is one of those videos where I'm just gonna have to kind of go back to my days at Ticketmaster and quote Mark, my old colleague. Well, I'm not gonna quote him but I will tell you something that we spoke about a while back that may kind of spark this idea of mine, or this thought I've had here today. And we were talking about, and we're talking about JavaScript frameworks, right? Because we never talk about JavaScript frameworks and how amazing those are. I mean, never, right? We've never argued about that. We're like honest to God, we were like an old married couple, or 1980s comedy duo or something. Anywho, he made the argument at this point in time, or at that time, he made the argument that it's really weird, and that in JavaScript land, it's almost considered normal today, at least, that you rewrite things or that you add new things to your tech stack, and that you continuously change either framework or things of that nature in order to keep up with the trends. And he made such a great argument about that, where he said that it's completely unsustainable if you think about it. I mean, if you have to rewrite things at a fairly regular interval, I mean, how can you just think about that? Imagine if your car needed to be deconstructed and reassembled in different parts every 2 years. It's just insanity. And honestly, I was agreeing with him, because it is kind of insanity. If you think about it, it's really weird that things in JavaScript land are moving so quickly and changing so drastically that for the most part, if you want to maintain a JavaScript project these days, you kind of have to put a lot of work into that. You really have to, if you want to be trendy, you want to be have a popular working environment or popular tools or whatever, you kind of have to put a lot of work in order to maintain that in JavaScript land, because the language moves so quickly. If you take a look at something like C# or Java, that's actually not the case. These more stable languages don't move that quickly. It is, and honestly, I think that is why they're so popular, apart from them, of course, being very old. But I think the main reason why these languages are very popular with more conservative organizations that have a bigger focus on the business value of things. That's why they standardize on these things, because they don't have to rewrite their code base. And honestly, I spend a lot of time in the JavaScript community, and that's where, and Node and so forth. And I have so many great discussions with programmers who love the innovation, love the movement and all that stuff. And I think that's great, because I think we sorely need people like that. We really need people who are trendy, who are pushing ideas and doing all that stuff. And we also need the conservatives who kind of say that, yeah, it's great that you're doing all this, but rather people who are challenging innovation, because just innovating over and over and over doesn't necessarily mean that you're building something better. And I'll give you a great example as to what the thought that I had basically. And the thought I've had is basically that I'm very happy and I feel very lucky that there are people out there who are more, and hopefully I'll be that sort of I would like to be the sort of in-between person. I want to be the person who stands and says, this is, when somebody is innovating and I see this is a good idea, maybe we should try that out. But I also want to be the person who doesn't get on the hype train and I say, why would you do this? What's the value? It's much better to do this thing that we're already doing. You know, be this pragmatist that can do both. And I feel so lucky that right now I'm on the innovation spectrum of things, and maybe that has to do with my age, I don't know, or maybe it has to do with inexperience, once again, I don't know. But feel very lucky that there are conservative programmers out there who do an absolutely amazing job of maintaining projects that are stable, and that's where C++ comes into all of this. You know, the innovative youngsters or juniors or whoever, you may be out there and you may judge these more conservative people who you know, they're stuck in their ways or whatever you want to call it. But let's be honest here. A lot of the stuff that you take for granted, like let's take JavaScript, your ability to innovate and like change your mind and do all these things is based on a fundamental truth. This is only possible because there have been prep work done ahead of time that is so stable by people who have this more conservative mindset. And without them, your way of life would not be possible. If you want an example, take the browser. Most fundamental thing in the world for you as a web developer, for example. If you were living in the sort of world where Google or Facebook, or it's not Facebook, but Google and Microsoft and Apple, if they they're writing their browsers and in C++. And they have maintained this massive code base over time for so long. They are not rewriting that in a new language. They're not taking risks with the quality of that product, because they know that the most important, apart from it of course being a nice development experience, or rather a nice experience for the people using it, and it needs to be performant and so forth, stability is key here. Because just think about it, what happens if they start having the sort of mindset that we see in Node.js these days, where, you know, people almost feel that it is okay for you to move quickly, innovate and break things and not be all that considerate in terms of long-term support and stability and so forth. I mean, our way of life would end. Like, we would not be able to use that piece of technology. So having conservative, and I don't even like that word conservative, having people with the mindset that stability and quality and being able to trust that something works for 100 years the same way, consistency if you will, these people are extremely important. And honestly, without them, you and I and all the hipster, trendy, yeah, let's rewrite this in Angular type of people, our way of life would not be possible. It wouldn't. And that's why I feel it's so important for us to kind of take a step back sometimes from the hype about, I don't know, reactive programming and functional like all these trendy things, and really have a discussion and really try to understand the people who have been doing this for much longer than you and I, and have built things that have been around so long that they would, without them, as I said, our way of life would not be possible. Because I'm pretty sure that Linus Torvalds doesn't come into his office every 6 months and say, hey, let's rewrite the Linux kernel in something else, or let's try some cool new practice because he read an article that made him inspired him to take risks with the project. I don't think he's doing that. I don't know Linus myself, but I would suspect that he's not that sort of person. And I think that that's healthy. I think you have to have that balance between knowing when you should innovate, because you need to innovate as well, because we need to push things forward so that we find these new ideas. You have to fail over and over when it comes to innovation in order to find something that might be a good thing. But I think that should be the exception to the rule. I think that for every 10 things you try out or experiment with, maybe one of them is something that you should actually really consider to be a part of a positive change for whatever stable standard that you're going for. Because I think that we can all agree that what we want here is to create stable long-term solutions. And that's the one thing that I think that we in the web right now, and that's kind of where Mark, and he made such a great argument about this. I think that's what we are lacking here in JavaScript land, because most of us have not ever had to work on technology that's going to be around for a really long time. You don't think in that time frame. Think about it this way. When I was working at Ticketmaster, that product has been around, or rather that company and that system in different forms, of course, has been around for longer than I've been alive, or rather virtually the same amount of time. Think about that. If you're building something that's going to be around, and this is so true for C#, C++. If you're going to build something that needs to be around for 30 years, most of us we don't even think in those terms. Most beautiful thing in the world was that we actually had unit tests at that project, where the original programmers who've been there since way back, they had put a time-based unit test, and it was only when I started that we realized that they had made an arbitrary number that felt big, that was in the future, a date, in order to run the unit test against. And it was just 20 years, or 15 years or 20 years or something like that. Just think about that. They had never even considered that their product would be around for longer than 15 years. And let's ask yourself, how often have you actually thought about that type of long-term programming, that type of long-term spectrum or perspective when you're writing your code? Just think about it. Not saying that you shouldn't be innovating. Just think about the long term sometimes. Just think about maybe rewriting things all the time isn't the greatest thing in the world. Maybe finding a really good idea that will work for a very long time is the way to go. Have a great day.